It is one of the most controversial denominations in the world, and apparently one of the most dangerous, Scientology.
We really lost everything. We were ruined. Completely ruined, both financially and mentally.
Clearwater, Florida, the headquarters and center of power of the sect and corporation. All of its worldwide activities are overseen from here, making headlines along the way. Now the self-proclaimed church is attracting public attention again, as several mysterious cases of death are being reported close to the Scientology organization circles. German Scientologist Biggie Reichert found dead in Hamburg. The murder squad found 28 mysterious wounds on her body. German Scientologist Conrad Eichner found fatally ill due to denial of medical assistance in time.
In my opinion, there are two main factors involved in these mysterious deaths. One is denial of assistance, which is quite common among Scientologists, and the other is that investigative authorities appear to be helpless and don't get any support from the Scientologists.
Can this be true? Despite many inconsistencies, authorities often stop investigating, giving no comment.
If any Scientologist who's in good standing gets involved in a problem, they pull out all the resources that anyone could imagine to protect that person and to try to remove them from any adverse consequence from normal government administration.
Why did these Scientologists die? What part did Scientology play in their mysterious deaths? And why are German authorities suddenly stopping their investigations? The search for answers has only just begun. Clearwater, Florida. Once a famous seaside resort, the city is now mainly one thing: the mecca of the Scientology organization. In the center of town stands the Flag Building, also known as the Superpower Building, the new centerpiece of the globally operating sect and corporation. Movie stars like Tom Cruise, John Travolta and Kirstie Alley are promoting Scientology around the world. Modern techniques are supposed to provide members with even more capabilities in the new Superpower Building. Scientology is offering the pathway to happiness, but the organization has a dark side. I'm with Victoria Britton. The interior designer from Charlottesville, Virginia, is visiting Clearwater for the first time. She wants to see the place where her youngest son Kyle died 6 years ago under suspicious circumstances. She is shocked by the sight of the uniformed Scientologists. Her son Kyle Brennan died from a gunshot wound while visiting his father Tom in this house in February 2007. Clearwater police claimed suicide as the cause of death. His father, Tom Brennan, had been living separately from Victoria for quite some time and is a member of the Scientology organization. As usual during investigations against the sect, in this case there are also inconsistencies and questionable coincidence. Until today, the actual event of the crime hasn't been resolved, a fact that his mother cannot accept.
I do not know what happened to my son, and that is where I stand today. I do not know what happened to my son. I do not know who pulled the trigger.
The tragic death of 20-year-old Kyle Brennan is one of the most mysterious criminal cases in Clearwater, the city of Scientologists. Followers from all over the world visit Clearwater to progress further on the path of enlightenment of Scientology, the so-called bridge to total freedom. Like all Scientologists, Kyle's father also studied here at Flag, the name of their headquarters. Kyle had known for years that his father was an avid follower of L. Ron Hubbard and wanted to become a so-called operating Thetan.
I overheard them having a conversation, and one of the boys was talking about that his dad was a professor at the university and another dad was a businessman. And Kyle said, well, my dad, he thinks he's going to be a Jedi Knight. And he was talking about, obviously, his father taking these Scientology courses and that one day he would have these magical powers.
In fact, founder and science fiction author L. Ron Hubbard told his followers about the superpower they could gain from Scientology. Scientologists want to save the world from doom. To achieve that, as many people as possible need to climb the bridge to total freedom. Freedom, for Scientologists, means that the soul needs to be freed from all negative recollections from this and alleged previous lives. This is supposed to be achieved by auditing sessions. Once you have crossed the bridge to total freedom and got rid of all negative recollections, you become an operating Thetan, a purified spiritual being.
The bridge to total freedom is a system of different courses and qualifications. Scientologists are promised that they will become more and more capable and successful by taking part in those courses, to no avail. But they believe in it. In fact, it only creates a dependency and costs a lot of money.
Auditing is a type of lie detector test which is supposed to track and erase negative, troubling experiences from the past. By the way, none of these methods or their validity have ever been scientifically proven. An auditor uses an e-meter to measure subjects' reactions to questions they pose. The e-meter is a device that is supposed to display changes in the electric resistance of the body. Readings are taken by holding 2 electrodes in your hands. Scientologists claim that they can evaluate psychological states by the pointer's movement patterns. The questions can be personal and direct. Are you seeing a psychologist? Have you been told not to remember things? Have you ever had sex while under the influence of alcohol? Tom Brennan attends auditing sessions too. The results of the questioning are recorded. For outsiders, it is hard to understand why Scientologists agree to having everything laid bare like that.
You basically disclose everything that could be of a negative nature, which is the only way to reach the higher levels to become clean. So many people agree to do it, and they don't say, this is a private issue, this is nobody's business. No, they disclose everything. And I mean everything. As an outsider, one cannot imagine what Scientologists are willing to do during that process.
The sect's founder, Hubbard, sees psychiatry as one of the main enemies of Scientology and wanted it abolished. Scientologists regard psychiatry apparently as a big danger for mankind, and this sealed the fate of young Kyle Brennan. Kyle grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia. He loved Playmobil, liked to draw and to play with his siblings. He evolved to be a curious student, traveling with his stepfather Rick to Germany, the country of his ancestors. He was fascinated by the history of the city of Bamberg. During that time, he suffered from depression. The doctor prescribed antidepressants. His father's lifestyle was putting a strain on Kyle.
There had been an effort on Kyle's father to introduce him to Scientology, and Kyle was very much opposed to it. He thought his father as being very foolish by being involved in this organization. He saw his father working very, very long hours and making no money at all.
Like all Scientologists, Tom Brennan also idolizes the sect's leader, David Miscavige, whose sister Denise Miscavige Gentile is his auditor. She and the organization despise that Kyle is taking antidepressant Lexapro.
Okay, maybe you
Scientologists regard psychiatry and psychology as opponents and their enemies, as the Scientology organization would like to establish a monopoly over all psychiatric and psychological treatment. And they also believe that their technology can cure illnesses and mental problems, which poses great health risks, of course.
During his auditing sessions, Tom Brennan explains that his son doesn't want to end his psychiatric treatment. All auditing sessions are being recorded and archived. According to the investigation, Tom Brennan is instructed by Denise Miscavige-Gentile to, as Scientologists say, deal with his son and his medication. She demands Kyle join Scientology's anti-drug organization, Narconon. According to Scientologists, antidepressants are drugs. Narconon is rather controversial, as there have been several deaths in the USA and Canada at their centers.
Denise Miscavige spoke to me about placing Kyle in a Narconon facility. And at the time, I had no idea that Narconon was affiliated with the Church of Scientology. I really did not understand what they were trying to say, because Kyle was very much against illegal drugs. And his father knew this. He knew that he did not take illegal drugs. And so it made no sense to me. Why would you want him in a Narconon facility?
But it didn't come to that. Somebody apparently took away his medication. On the evening of the 19th of February 2007, Kyle died in his father's flat due to a gunshot wound. At the crime scene, investigators of Clearwater Police discovered Scientology books and films on the shelves. Kyle's body was lying headfirst in the laundry bucket. A revolver was secured. 1 bullet had been fired. 5 more were in Kyle's trouser pocket. Later, Clearwater Police found his medication in the locked trunk of Tom Brennan's car. Who hid it there? Clearwater Police were leading the investigation. The police station is in close proximity to Scientology's headquarters. Strange things were happening.
We had asked the detective if the crime scene had been processed for fingerprints. He had said no. We asked if there was a gunpowder residue check done on Kyle's hands, and he said no. After the case was closed, which took almost 2 years, we discovered that these tests had been performed, and the gunpowder residue check on my son's hand had been blocked from being analyzed.
There were similarly strange circumstances in connection with other Scientology-related deaths. I am submitting Kyle Brennan's file to a German forensic specialist, asking for his expertise.
First of all, the bullet has never been found. They claim it was a through and through. Therefore, the projectile exited the head and should have been found somewhere at the crime scene. This is not the case. Secondly, Kyle Brennan's hands were taped for gunshot residue, which is usually inherent in self-inflicted gunshot injuries. This tape has never been examined. Here the question is the same as before. Why?
The investigation files proved that the examination of the gunshot residue test has in fact been stalled by Clearwater Police.
I don't know that they found any evidence that Kyle had fired the gun. That's always a good place to start when you've got a handgun used in the homicide of a human being. You want to find out who fired it. I don't know that that was undertaken. Then you've got the missing bullet, which to me is it's a small apartment. How can you miss a bullet? It's got to be somewhere. I mean, just get a metal detector, and if you find a pipe or something, eliminate that, but eventually you'll find it. So the fact that we have all these loose ends, these unanswered questions, these unfinished aspects of the investigation, to me, cast doubt on the whole investigation.
Attorney at law Luke Lurett is experienced in cases of members of the Church of Scientology dying in mysterious circumstances.
Be well, all right?
Kyle Brennan's case is being handled by Clearwater Police Department. As in other cases where this department is involved, evidence seems to be disappearing. Witness statements are contradictory. Investigations seem to be obstructed. Head of Scientology, David Miscavige, whose sister is involved in the case, likes to have a good relationship with the police. All of their investigations are followed by Scientology's intelligence service, OSA. This department is supposed to keep their public image clean. Sarah Heller was assigned to this case.
Whenever there is a threat of negative headlines, this Office of Special Affairs and its members become active, and they spread out to do lobbying work amongst politicians and public authorities, getting involved there. Or whenever a Scientologist dies, a suicide occurs, of which there have been several, they visit the relatives because they fear for Scientology's reputation, trying to calm the waves, to appease, and maybe to look for something that may incriminate them and put it away safely.
When Tom Brennan found his son dead, he first called his auditor, Denise Miscavige Gentile.
God.
Only 40 minutes later, he called the police. Denise was present during the crime scene investigation.
I'm afraid of his litigation. So can you please just tell me what happened? I came back.
Later on, Sarah Heller from OSA attended most of the questioning during the investigation.
They believe that all of the issues that involve anyone in Scientology should all be addressed, should all be administered by the church itself. They don't like that interference. They don't think anybody has authority over them. Obviously, they have to agree to submit to that authority, but I don't think that they participate in it cooperatively. I don't think they participate in it in goodwill. They try to avoid that participation as much as they can. So if any Scientologist who's in good standing gets involved in a problem, they pull out all the resources that anyone could imagine to protect that person and to try to remove them from any adverse consequence from normal government administration.
The list of inconsistencies is long. Police records are destroyed, and the question of how many people were present at the crime scene is still unclear. Kyle's computer was taken from the crime scene. Later, when his family got it back, all files had apparently been deleted after his death. In addition to the question about the missing bullet from the gun and the fingerprints of the deceased, Kyle's money is missing as well.
How does he normally pay them?
So Kyle's father, before calling an ambulance or the police, calls his Scientology handlers, and that is so suspicious. Is what do I do with all this? I mean, if it's my son and I find that there's some tragic situation, you would immediately call the authorities. The fact they waited so long, the issues with his computer, I mean, it just looks like something was done to manipulate things, and I'm not saying that we've proven that, but that period of time creates major suspicion.
We're driving through Clearwater. Radio journalist Tom Smith, a former member of Scientology's intelligence service, is one of their biggest opponents. Due to US media and former members, Clearwater is the organization's cash cow. Week after week, thousands of Scientologists attend the expensive special courses. They are making huge profits.
If you're selling $2,500 to have someone run around a room, that's pretty good. And you get, I mean, you can do the math on that. You know, you get 1,000 people paying $2,500 each for running around a room. You know, the overhead is minuscule and the profits are tremendous. And then they have to stay there across the street in the hotel, paying, hundreds of dollars a day for a room.
Which is also owned by...
Which is owned by another Scientology corporation. It's a separate corporation, but it's a Scientology corporation. So, I mean, it's quite a business plan.
The Scientologists reside in housing complexes like this, the hacienda. Everything is protected and guarded by personnel and security cameras. Wherever we are in Clearwater, Scientology's intelligence service OSA reports our movements via radios. There are CCTV cameras on almost every building. It is impossible to move without being watched. Clearwater police often seems to be following us. Tom researched that Denise Miscavige Gentile, the sister of Scientology's leader, was arrested recently for drug possession.
Do you think that she might know what went on in that day?
I do think so, in my opinion. There's some things that she probably didn't want to divulge for fear that her brother may retaliate against her, or someone in OSA may retaliate against her.
I'm asking Tom which role OSA member Sarah Heller might play in Kyle Brennan's case.
Well, because she handles the legal matters for Scientology, so she is there to make sure that she gets all the information about what happened, and that she doesn't divulge it to law enforcement or in a civil case to the opposition counsel.
Apparently, Scientology cares more about their reputation than solving the case. Why else should they be controlling information about a suicide in Clearwater? I call the press spokesman of Clearwater Police. I would like to know why there are so many unanswered questions in this investigation. Why no bullet was found? Why fingerprints weren't taken? I ask for an interview and submit my 18 questions in writing. The short reply, no thank you. In November 2012, a judge from Pinellas County dismissed the case of the Kyle Brennan death.
Everything that I believed in to be true with this country, with our judicial system, I realized was a lie. And that even when presented with enough evidence, that it did not matter, that they were just going to throw it out. It was like saying that his life did not matter, that he did not matter in this world. And it was very, to this day, it's
There are cases of mysterious deaths among German Scientologists as well, like Bavarian bus driver Conrad Eichner. Conrad Eichner from Ruhmannseigen in Lower Bavaria died in 1997, also in suspicious circumstances. The investigation revealed that the 43-year-old wasn't immediately taken to a doctor after he collapsed. In summer 1997, Scientologist Conrad Eichner received a request to drive Scientologists to a convention in Frankfurt. There he collapsed in a hotel, but instead of calling a doctor, the Scientologists took him to the Munich headquarters in Beistraße. Only after 4 days did they call an ambulance. Eichner suffered from poisoning symptoms, but the cause couldn't be determined. He spent 3 weeks in intensive care in a Munich hospital, then died of multiple organ failure.
I said, what happened here?
Da fällt der
He's collapsed, is unconscious,
ohne Bewusstsein und
and something needs to be done quickly.
muss doch ganz schnell gehandelt werden.
Umanseigen, a small gathering of houses. Eichner's career with Scientology has cost the family their house and property. His mother couldn't cope with it. He received huge bills for Scientology courses.
Und diese Frauen, die da drauf sind, die kennen wir ja auch nicht natürlich.
He really couldn't afford anything anymore, and we always thought that money wasn't so important to him. But in fact, he had huge debts. We just didn't know.
The last video images of Conrad Eichner, 23 years with Scientology, made him a frustrated, ill man. Despite the many courses, including one in Clearwater, he took part in, these courses cost up to 27,000 German marks, the equivalent of nearly 14,000 euros. Often he would just lie around, apathetic.
We found invoices you could not ever imagine, all from Scientology, all for their courses, sacks full of invoices.
For example, for the run-down detoxification programs, hour-long sauna visits followed by consumption of high-dose vitamin supplements. Apparently, Conrad Eichner didn't respond too well. Still, the cause of his death remains undetermined. On the 10th of February 1998, Munich police ordered the search of Scientology's local headquarters, looking for evidence in the Eichner case.
There had been people there. It must be possible to determine who was in that hotel, who found him, who transported him to Munich, who didn't call a doctor.
For the first time in such a case, there is actually evidence found, but the investigating officers lack factual knowledge about the sect. The information collected seems useless to them. As in Clearwater, the case is eventually closed.
It is just hard to connect all the dots. And there are rather few departments or investigators who have in-depth knowledge of Scientology.
The lobbying activities of Scientology intelligence service amongst public authorities should also not be underestimated. Their influence on such investigations can only be guessed at. But the families are being left alone with their grief and their unanswered questions. Did nobody from the authorities come to you?
Nobody ever came to us. Nobody told us that they had found out something, or that Conrad's case was under investigation, or that we could rely on them to do their best. Nobody did.
In the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung, Scientology denied all allegations in the Eichner case. Supposedly, they did not receive my request for an interview. The Munich authorities and the hospital also refused to be interviewed.
Ja, guten Tag, Herr Altendorfer.
A retired prosecutor writes, I today regret that I unfortunately didn't look at any of those files. Back then, neither I nor the investigating authorities understood their significance as profiling archives and databases. Members of Scientology create so-called knowledge reports. In one of them, operating Thetan Rosie F. describes how she managed, step by step, to influence Conrad Eichner to take loans out against his family's estates for a total of 200,000 German marks. She writes about their visits to his bank.
Conrad Eichner has been a member of Scientology for 16 years and hasn't succeeded to become clear or climb the bridge. He fell again and again and drank alcohol. We have therefore decided to help him climb the bridge. Conrad Eichner owns several estates, grassland, woods, fields and a house in Lower Bavaria.
but the estates are co-owned by the family. Eichner took a loan from his bank for alleged renovations of his house. His parents signed off on it. The Scientologists wanted more. According to the records, Conrad protested. He didn't want to get into trouble with his family.
We realized that he was somehow troubled, but we didn't see that this was in connection with Scientology.
When the bank asked for securities and proof, the Scientologists produced fake invoices about alleged renovation work for a total of 70,000 German marks. Eichner must have been under a lot of pressure because he took loans on all the family properties, including the almost 3.5 acres of land which his parents had built up after the war. The financial and psychological strain and his visit to Clearwater changed him.
There were moments when we saw that he was suffering, when he said he wanted to quit the sect. And he once told Mum, "If you knew what I experienced, you would drop dead." We later learned that he was in some sort of prison camp in Florida.
Conrad Eichner died before he could quit. He no longer had health insurance. It is still unclear why his organs failed like those of an old man. It also remains unanswered why an ambulance was only called days after his first collapse. Scientology denies all responsibility and declares Eichner was never forced to take part in the purification rundowns or to buy or consume vitamin supplements. Following Conrad Eichner's death, a nightmare began for the family, which continues today. The bank is asking for the 200,000 German marks back in payment for all the loans, in addition to the 39,000 marks in hospital bills.
It is a huge amount. We had to come up with all of it and lost everything back then. We were ruined, completely ruined, both financially and mentally.
Many people who have suffered, like the Eichner family, feel abandoned by the state. Very few government agencies deal with the problem seriously. In addition, the 2013 report on the protection of the German Constitution mentions the activities of the Scientology organization. But still, few federal states are taking the issue seriously enough.
Scientology aims for a new order of society where our democratic foundations and our constitution would be limited or even eliminated. If you look at our constitution, there are things like freedom of speech, basic human rights, equality before the law, free elections. All this and much more isn't relevant in Scientology's totalitarian ideology.
Clearwater. Here, the Scientology world order is almost in place. The organization rules the town. In Sandcastle Hotel, Scientologists are being trained to become operating thetans, those spirits who are allegedly free from all recollections. This place also plays a part in the unexplained death of veterinarian Biggie Reichert from Bavaria. This case also shows that Scientology's techniques fail when people are in need. Help from outside is called either too late or not at all, sometimes with deadly results. In February 2006, Scientologist Biggie Reichert visited this place seeking for help. Before, she wrote to her auditor,
"Dear Samantha, I'm about to lose my dynamics. My husband and I are in a lot of debt, and I think I will separate from him. I'm afraid to lose everything that is important in my life. I am not allowed to travel to Flag. I'm afraid. Can you help me? Can you call me to Flag?"
In February 2006, Biggie Reichert lived in this house. It was her last stay in Clearwater. On March 1st, 2006, she flew back to Hamburg. 5 days later, operating thetan Biggie Reichert was found dead by the police in her car in a Hamburg underground car park. First, there were indications that it was a suicide. But as with Kyle Brennan's case, there were many inconsistencies. In the Scientologist's car, there were bloody paper towels, injection needles, and prescriptions for strong narcotics. But I couldn't find any mentions of them, either in the investigation files of Hamburg prosecution nor in the forensics report. During the post-mortem, the forensic doctor discovered 28 wounds on the dead women's head that resembled burn marks. Hamburg authorities started their investigation.
There were unspecifiable changes that are most likely the result of an exogenous, meaning external, force. In my experience, this is usually caused by thermal influence, which means heat that may originate from exposure to electric current. This concurs with the findings of Hamburg forensics that state a thermal source as the most likely cause of those injuries.
Forensics and police requested a search warrant to look for a possible cause of the head wounds, but it was denied by the prosecutor's office. So it is impossible to clarify what happened during Biggie's last stay in Clearwater. Why was Biggie Reichert so desperate? Why didn't the Scientologists inform her family or professional help in time? Biggie Reichert visited Clearwater several times a year. She was on special courses on which the same questions are asked and answered over and over again to try and keep thoughts within a limited range.
Can birds fly?
You already asked that question.
You will feel better if we continue. Can birds fly?
As I already said, yes, they can.
Thank you. Can fish swim?
Her records and the investigation file show that she was absolutely convinced by Scientology's techniques, right until the end. For many years, veterinarian Biggie Reichert worked 3 jobs at the same time in Hamburg. In a veterinary clinic, at her husband's Hans-Jürgen's real estate office, and as an employee of the Scientology organization. For more than 40 hours of work per week, she monthly received from the Scientology organization between 80 and 300 euros. The bridge to total freedom cost the Reicherts a fortune. The family guesses a total amount of 1.5 million euros. The Scientology organization claims that she was working as a freelancer, but Biggie had to ask for holiday time, like a regular employee. When she was about to collapse due to the workload, she repeatedly contacted her superiors at the organization in Germany and the US.
I had been recruited and got a job for 40 hours per week. I was told that this would be doable, but it is not. I'm switching between my real job, Hans-Jürgen's company, and the organization. If I work additionally at events of the organization, I don't even get a day off in lieu. Last week was the first time in half a year that I could visit my family in Bavaria. It was very hard to get that approved.
Biggie wanted to work less for the organization, but her superior denied her request.
She suggested several times that I should quit my job as a veterinarian because I wasn't flexible enough. But I don't want that, as it is a very important part of my life and my income, and I love what I'm doing.
Repeatedly, the organization claimed that they had no knowledge about her heavy workload or her personal and financial problems.
To put it mildly, this is hard to believe. Especially because Scientology is based on members supervising each other frequently. Also, Scientology's so-called ethics department is specialized in helping members to deal with such problems.
Biggie's family still doesn't know what happened to her at the times in Clearwater and Hamburg. The people around her are keeping quiet. Now her relatives have asked for professional help. They always avoided confrontation with Biggie.
It was probably our mistake that we didn't intervene somehow. But back then we said, no, we are done with this. We don't want to know. I wish that the people who are responsible for what was put in her head and her death will experience it all themselves one day. All of those people should experience that to the full extent.
The investigation files of the Biggie Reichert case amount to many hundreds of pages. Several officers from the Criminal Investigation Department, Constitution Protection, and others have worked on it for 2 years. Why is that, if it is considered a suicide? Many investigations around Scientology, like the ones about Kyle Brennan, Conrad Eichner, and Biggie Reichert, are grinding to a halt. Many things are still in the dark. All those cases clearly indicate how dangerous Scientology is, also for the relatives.
Although the Scientology organization has lost members, they haven't become any less dangerous because of it. They are under continued surveillance, especially in those countries where Scientology is big, there is adequate investigation and prosecution.
Clearwater, Florida, the city of Scientologists. During our filming, there was another mysterious death at Flag in Cleveland Street, the road where Kyle Brennan died. On January the 28th, 2014, Russian businessman Yevgeny Zarkin fell out of an 8th-floor window to his death. According to the Scientology organization, he was a successful and happy operating Thetan. Clearwater Police is investigating.
Lights off? No, I don't drive with lights off.
Okay. Well, anyway, somebody gave out your tag and said you were driving around the neighborhood with no